we interviewed Mike Vrabel today.
How'd you feel about that?
Don't go that way. You guys gotta get an offensive mind.
He is a culture.
Why do we?
I think culture hires are a bit overrated. And if you're the Jets, you need to go for that first-time head coach, that Ben Johnson. You gotta find your Matt LaFleur, your Kevin O'Connell. You have to find that offensive mind who can build a strong offense.
Here's what I don't get.
Because winning builds cultures. I don't think the culture hire solves everything. You're still getting the same issues with the coordinators.
Here's what I don't get. When you hire a head coach, you gotta hire the best candidate for your team. The route of going with offensive coaches, sometimes they work. Look at the Vikings, look at the Rams, look at the Packers. They work. What about the Titans this offseason? They hired a offensive line.
I didn't think that was a good hire.
And Brian Callahan hasn't been good.
I like Brian.
We thought Will would be better.
To be fair, that team is still not great. But Westbrook Akine kind of broke out.
Westbrook Akine, yeah.
And Calvin Ridley played okay.
And
also, Tony Pollard was successful.
That's a
You're
big
cooking.
play merchant.
Tony Pollard and Tajay didn't look too bad.
You need to sway coordinators and top of the end head coaching candidates to go to your team. Ben Johnson's not interviewing with the Jets. Liam Cohen's probably not interviewing with the Jets. What OC outside of those two?
Why would Liam Cohen not interview with the Jets? That's how that is.
Because I think that the Jets right now are a mess, and I think going for Liam Cohen, I think is a little bit too risky. The Jets went out and they signed an offensive-minded guy in Adam Gase, and it failed terribly after his stint with the Dolphins. Sometimes you got to look at the team's history and see what they've done, and the Jets have always been a defensive-oriented franchise. We hired Rex Ryan. He led us to 2 AFC Championship games. We hired Todd Bowles. He went 10-6 in his first season, and we didn't let him see that out. And look at what he's doing with the Buccaneers right now. He's hired back-to-back coordinators and Dave Canales and Liam Cohen that have been good. The Jets are a defensive-oriented franchise. That's what they've been. So I feel like, well, if there's not a candidate out there that you can sign and that actually wants to go to your team, then no. If a team right now lacks a quarterback, what's the point of hiring an offensive mind?
Because that helps develop one.
So Ben Johnson, that's an unrealistic scenario for the Jets.
Ben Johnson's obviously unrealistic.
I think
Liam
Cohen's realistic.
Is realistic.
Between Liam Cohen or Mike Vrabel, you think the Jets should take a swing on Liam Cohen rather than Mike Vrabel?
I don't think Mike Vrabel's the best option. And you're making a good point that it didn't work out with Adam Gase, and sometimes offensive hires don't work out. The Broncos hired Nathaniel Hackett, it didn't work out. But that didn't sway them back into the direction of hiring a Vic Fangio or Vance Joseph. They went back into the offensive market, and they got the best one available in Sean Payton.
But it's Sean Payton.
Exactly.
It's Ben Johnson. If Sean Payton but Ben Johnson is unrealistic for the Jets.
Sean Payton is kind of a veteran too.
See, but you know what? Let me not use this argument because apparently the favorite to get Ben Johnson is Jacksonville. They have Trevor Lawrence. Mm-hmm. That's why it's a bad organization. Yeah. It's a bad team, but he's willing to take a chance on that because they at least have a quarterback that he can use a play.
Also, a coordinator that openly has said he's only going to go to a team that he feels like is right. That's why he didn't get hired as a head coach last year. He could have went to the Commanders, but he turned that down. So tell me, out of all the realistic candidates,
you could argue that was a mistake.
Maybe, yeah, you can, but still, I think he's going to have his choice of the Bears, of the Jaguars this offseason.
Easily.
He's going to be a head coach regardless. Right. So outside of Ben Johnson's unrealistic.
Yes.
So outside of Ben Johnson, who's an offensive mind that the Jets could realistically get, who you'd hire over Mike Vrabel and also somebody like Brian Flores.
Don't overthink it.
I like the Flores hire. I think he's such a game changer as a defensive coach that is a better option than Mike Vrabel. I also think Liam Cohen's a better option. Flores
also fired Ben Johnson.
I know.
Flores fired Ben Johnson when he was like a position coach.
He was wide receiver coach.
Yeah. I'm not going to read too deep. I mean, obviously it looks horrible, but like...
No, I'm trying to start the pot.
Yeah. So Aaron Glenn also is a candidate.
Mm-hmm. If I'm being honest, I understand where John's coming from.
I like Vrabel with the Jets.
I understand Vrabel made some good moves to start his tenure in Tennessee. The way that it ended kind of soured my view of him. That being said... You guys need a certain level of discipline in the building. They lack discipline. They're big players. It just seems as if, not all of them, but it seems as if this team is full of egos, unfortunately for them. You need a leader in there, and that can be Vrabel. Now, I understand what John's saying, though. This league has shifted to an offensive one. And Liam Cohen has done a pretty great job over here in Tampa Bay. And we were worried about them coming into this season because you lose Canales to the Panthers, and Baker has his revival with Canales. How is he going to look in this next year? And he arguably has an even better year than he had last. I can understand wanting to go in that direction. That also being said, you guys getting a quarterback into the draft is not out of the possibility. It's not.
I think the Jets need to focus on building having a culture builder, whether that's Vrabel, Aaron Glenn, Brian Flores. I'd be happy with either of them. You look at the playoff landscape right now in the AFC. The Chiefs, offensive coach is their head coach. The Bills, a defensive coach is their head coach. The Ravens, a former special teams coach, is their head coach with John Harbaugh.
We can argue, though, the hire of Todd Monken has elevated this team to new heights.
Yeah, I mean, any head coach, you got to get your coordinators right.
Agreed.
So that's why, to me, it's not always a necessity that your head coach is your offensive play caller, because you can hire those. Then you look at the Texans. DeMeco Ryans, defensive head coach, has led a turnaround. This year's been disappointing, but last year led a turnaround. Look at the Steelers. Really Mike Tomlin is not an offensive-minded head coach. He's in the playoff picture right now. The Chargers. Jim Harbaugh is not an offensive play caller. He's more of a galvanizer.
It's weird because he is an offensive mind, but he just does not call plays.
He's a former quarterback, so he definitely understands the position. And then the Broncos offensive coach. So half of those playoff teams are led by teams that don't have offensive coaches as a head coach. Then look at the NFC. The Eagles, Nick Sirianni was the offensive coordinator. That counts. The Lions, Dan Campbell. He's more of a special teams, just galvanizer of the troops.
He was a tight end coach. He technically counts as offense.
Vikings, Kevin O'Connell. That's obvious.
Go.
You look at the Packers, Matt LaFleur. That's obvious. Go. Commanders, Dan Quinn, defensive mind. He's their head coach. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Todd Bowles, defensive mind. He's their head coach. So that's all I'm saying is that it's not just because you hire a defensive coach doesn't mean that it's over. You can have success, and half of the teams in the playoffs right now are led by defensive-minded head coaches.
And you look at Vrabel, though, with the defensive-minded head coaches, you have to hit on OC.
Yeah.
You look at what happened last year with Bobby Slowick. DeMeco looks like a genius, one of the best head coaching hires of last year.
Look at Philly.
But how a year turns, and now everyone's against Bobby Slowick. For Mike Vrabel, you hire Arthur Smith. You have this amazing breakout offense with Tannehill, Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, Jonnu Smith. Arthur Smith gets his own gig in Atlanta. Now this offense is really one-dimensional, really centered around Derrick Henry. Yeah. And Vrabel's so far gone to the point where he gets fired.
Happened to us last year. We had Steichen left, hired a new guy, dog shit. Got to hit. You don't hit on OC. If you can have the head coach, but if you don't hit on OC or DC,
you got to hit on both. Like the Eagles,
shit gets dark.
The offense for the Eagles all year long, it wasn't what it was, but it was still able to get by with just
so
talent.
Much better than last year.
The defense is the biggest improvement for the Eagles from last year, and they had to hit on the DC. So even if you have an offensive,
shout out to Vic,
minded head coach, going from play caller to now having to address the entire team and be involved in everything. That's a lot of responsibility. We saw Thomas Brown be the interim OC and then get elevated to head coach.
Insane.
And then the entire game plan fell apart. So I just feel like the Jets have to go with a safe option. I like Liam Cohen. I think he's going to be phenomenal. But they got to go with a culture builder. Brian Flores makes sense. Even though the Dolphins stint didn't end that well, they still were a 500 team.
Could you argue Robert Saleh was supposed to be a culture builder?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do things opposite of what we've been doing.
I don't think he built a bad culture. I think Aaron Rodgers got into the building.
I agree with this.
He was part of what was holding them together. And they've said,
hey,
you're saying Robert Saleh.
Question. Quinion or Ahmad this year?
Easy.
It's Ahmad. Shit's getting
Sauce Gardner is a better player.
All right.
I'm just asking what a better
He
year.
didn't ask you Sauce.
I didn't ask you that. I said Ahmad.
He didn't ask you Sauce.
Well, better year. Quinion has had a pretty amazing year.
Thanks, bro. I appreciate it.
But, Quinion is not shadowing nobody. He's staying to his side.